I was 7 centimeters dilated when my phone buzzed against the hospital blanket and lit up with a bank alert for $18,000. For one stupid second, I thought something was wrong with the mortgage. Then another contraction tore through me. The monitor climbed, and Tyler's text came in right underneath the alert. The baby can wait. The boys needed me in Vegas. I stared at the words until they stopped looking like a joke and started looking like a theft. Our emergency fund. My maternity cushion. The money I had stacked, one careful transfer at a time, so childbirth wouldn't break us before diapers even started. Then the nurse beside me made the soft little sound women make when they hate your husband on sight. She turned her phone and showed me Tyler's Instagram story. Booth lights, bottle service, his hand up in the air, champagne exploding behind him like fatherhood was something he could reschedule. I smiled. Not because I was fine, because timing had finally stopped being his. Then I asked for the hospital phone. By the time the baby was on my chest, pink and furious and real, the money was already gone. That was the first thing I understood clearly after the noise of labor dropped back into ordinary hospital sounds. The suction hiss from the wall, the paper crinkle under my legs, the monitor settling, somebody laughing too loudly at the nurses' station down the hall, because hospitals never really stop being workplaces just because your life split in two inside one room. I lay there with my daughter tucked against me and the taste of metal still in my mouth from the last push, while the nurse adjusted my blanket and asked whether there was anyone she should call for me. Her badge said Carla. Her voice was gentle in the brisk, practiced way women get when they have seen too many husbands fail under fluorescent lights. I told her no. Then I borrowed the hospital phone and called Marjorie Sloan at Stonebridge Credit Union. Marjorie had helped us open the baby fund in April. The same week I had switched over the automatic transfers and color-coded our budget tabs for maternity leave. She was one of those older bank women who could smell nonsense through a lobby wall. Hair always sprayed into place, reading glasses on a chain, fingernails short, sentences shorter. When she answered, I gave her my name, my account number, and one sentence. I'm in labor and my husband just drained our emergency account. She did not gasp. That was one reason I trusted her. Are you authorizing the withdrawal? She asked. No. Did you know it was happening? No. Was he physically with you when the transfer cleared? I looked at my daughter's damp, dark hair, at the little crease between her brows that looked too serious for a baby less than 10 minutes old. No, I said. He was in Vegas. There was a pause, then the sound of keys on her end. Not panic. Procedure. Lena, she said, and hearing my name in that crisp voice steadied me more than any breathing exercise had. I'm flagging the activity and restricting employee-side visibility until I review the access path. That phrase lodged under my ribs. Employee-side visibility. Tyler worked at Stonebridge, assistant branch manager and loafers too expensive for a man who still let me clip coupons for the pharmacy and compare deductible plans in bed at night. I knew bank language well enough to understand when someone had just moved the conversation out of marriage and into policy. At 32, I had already spent years being the one who remembered the things that kept other people from learning hard lessons in public. I handled accounts receivable and payroll for a medical supply distributor outside Chattanooga, which meant my whole day was built around dates, codes, late fees, coverage limits, and the little dull details people only notice once they fail. At home, I did the same thing. I kept the folder for hospital pre-registration. I tracked the deductible. I set aside a maternity cushion, one transfer at a time, because babies cost money before they cost sleep. Every one of those $18,000 had a job. hospital balance, mortgage buffer, utility float, formula if nursing went sideways. 3 months of not needing to beg. Tyler knew that. That was what made the text feel so filthy. The baby can wait. The boys needed me in Vegas. Carla came back while I was still staring at the hospital phone in my hand. She glanced at my face, then at the untouched water cup by the bed. "You need anything?" she asked. I almost said, "My husband." Then I looked at my daughter's tiny ear pressed flat against my skin and said, "A charger." She nodded and went to look for one. An hour later, after the pediatric resident had come through and after the photographer from the hospital gift shop was politely turned away by Carla before she even reached my door, my own phone buzzed again. Not Tyler this time. His mother. I let it ring once, then answered because women like Denise Parker never stop talking just because you give them space. "Lena," she said, all syrup and strain, "don't you go making a scene over this. Tyler told me you understood the boy's trip was important for his future." I felt something cold uncoil in me then. Not because she believed him, because he had already started laying track while I was still in the delivery room. "No," I said. "He told you that." "He said you know how these things work. Networking, opportunity. Men need one last clean weekend before all the baby chaos." I looked down at the baby in my arms. She had one fist tucked under her chin like she was bracing against a world she had arrived in 5 hours too early for. Men need one last clean weekend. There are sentences that sound stupid until you place them beside a bank alert. Then they sound like motive. When Carla brought my charger, she also brought my overnight bag from the chair in the corner, and with it, my iPad. The one Tyler and I both used when we wanted a larger screen for bills, travel confirmations, or streaming something half-watched in bed. As she plugged the charger into the wall, a banner slid across the top of the lock screen. Blue Ace Hospitality. Capital contribution received. I stared at the words until Carla, who was not nosy but was not blind either, quietly turned the screen fully toward me. Below the banner sat a forwarded email Tyler had not meant to leave visible. "Vegas deposit landed. Now we can finalize your piece before the launch." What made Tyler's text so hard to survive later was not just the cruelty of the timing. It was the contrast. If he had always been careless, Vegas would have hurt in a blunt, ordinary way. Ugly, yes, but legible. Instead, Tyler had spent the last year speaking fluent safety. The nursery was proof of that. We painted it on a Sunday in August when the whole house smelled like primer and sweet tea, and I was too pregnant to trust my own balance. I had one hand on the wall, one on the brush, and Tyler kept coming up behind me to steady my wrist every time I reached too high. At one point, I stepped back onto the drop cloth, slipped a little, and he caught me with both hands, one at my elbow, one flat over mine. Then he stayed there, his chest warm against my back, both our hands resting on the crib rail we had not even assembled yet. "You and the baby come first," he said, his mouth close to my neck. "Everything else waits." He kissed just below my hairline after that, not dramatic, just a slow press of his mouth against my skin that made the whole room feel calmer than it was. I remember leaning back for 1 second longer than I meant to because I was scared of money, delivery, and all the invisible ways a baby can make a marriage reveal itself. He made it sound simple. Us first, everything else later. That sentence sat in me for months like something sacred. The second memory was smaller, which is why it hurt worse. By late September, my feet swelled so badly at night I could see the sock marks for an hour after I peeled them off. One Thursday, I was on the couch with my laptop open to the maternity budget, shifting numbers around while the weatherman talked about storms rolling in. I had my glasses on, hair clipped up, one ankle propped on a pillow because it ached all the way to my calf. Tyler came in from work, loosened his tie, took one look at me, and set his phone down without checking it. That mattered to me then. Small things mattered when you were pregnant and measuring love in practical units. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Making sure the hospital doesn't bankrupt us before the baby gets a name." He smiled, knelt on the rug in front of me, and lifted my foot into his lap. I protested out of habit. He ignored me with that warm, easy confidence I mistook for devotion. He pulled off my sock, pressed his thumb into the arch of my foot, and worked both hands around my ankle until the ache softened. When he touched the swollen place above my heel, I flinched. "That bad?" he asked. "Only if I ever planned on walking again." He bent and kissed the top of my foot. Then he looked up at me and said, "I'd sell my truck before I touched our safety money. That fund stays for you two." You two. I believed him completely then. Not because it was romantic, because it was ordinary and right, and said while he was holding the ugliest part of pregnancy in both hands without acting inconvenienced. That was the Tyler I carried into the hospital with me. The one who steadied the paintbrush, the one who kissed my neck in the nursery, the one who knelt on the rug and held my swollen foot like it mattered. So when the bank alert lit up under those fluorescent lights, and the text came through about Vegas and the boys and the baby being able to wait, what broke first was not the money. It was translation. All at once, those old moments stopped feeling like safety and started feeling like rehearsal. The language of care, the gestures of care. A man practicing tenderness right up until the exact second it bought him enough trust to betray me expensively. And lying in that hospital bed with my daughter asleep in the bassinet beside me, I understood the emergency fund was not the only thing Tyler had been draining in secret. He had been spending my faith the whole time. A week after I gave birth, I drove to Stonebridge with a pad the size of a dinner plate tucked inside my underwear and a bottle of ibuprofen rattling in the cup holder. That is the part nobody puts in revenge stories. The body does not care that your mind has entered investigation mode. It still hurts when you sit too fast. Your milk lets down at bad times. I had slept maybe 9 broken hours across 4 nights, and still I was the one carrying the folder with hospital forms, screenshots, and account numbers because Tyler had mistaken postpartum for helpless. Marjorie had told me to come in through the side entrance near compliance. The lobby smelled like coffee and printer toner. A teller pointed me toward the glass conference rooms. That was when I saw them. Tyler was in the corner room with the woman from the Vegas story. Shay Monroe. White coat dress, tan heels, the same tilted smile from the booth photos. On the table between them sat champagne flutes, sponsorship mock-ups, and a stack of receipts clipped to a presentation deck. Blue Ace Hospitality in navy script across the top. My daughter's formula money in a nicer font. I should have kept walking to Marjorie's office. Instead, I stopped where the door had been left open 2 inches, and the whole ugly play arranged itself for me. Shay laughed and looked down at one of the mock-ups. "This strap keeps slipping." Tyler crouched without hesitation. He dropped to one knee and took hold of the thin strap of her heel, one hand steadying her ankle, the other refastening the buckle with the same easy concentration he had used on my swollen foot on the couch. For a second, I could not breathe right. The rug under our coffee table flashed through me, the weather report muttering in the background, his thumb at my ankle. I'd sell my truck before I touched our safety money. Then he looked up at Shay and smiled that private smile I knew too well. "Try that," he said. She stood, tested the heel, and grinned. Tyler rose with her, took the flute from her hand, and kissed the back of her knuckles before returning it. Same neat claim, same compact tenderness. Shay touched his tie. "You are absurdly good at this." "At what?" he asked. "Making women think they're safe?" They both laughed. That laugh did more for me than any screenshot Marjorie had sent. It took the last softness out of my confusion. Then Tyler stepped behind her and straightened the clasp at the back of her neckline, fingers brushing the nape of her neck in a gesture so familiar my own skin went cold. The nursery flashed in my mind. Wet paint, his hand over mine on the crib rail. You and the baby come first. Everything else waits. Only now, everything else had not waited at all. It had boarded a plane, checked into a hotel, and drunk champagne on my deductible. Shay tilted her head toward the glass and said, "Do you think your wife knows?" Tyler didn't even look guilty. He looked inconvenienced. "Lena knows how to panic in spreadsheets," he said. "Not in rooms." That sentence went through me like ice water. Useful in private, small in public. The woman who handled bills and maternity binders and would never understand how a real room worked. I backed away before the floor could creak under me. Marjorie's office was 3 doors down. When I stepped inside, she took one look at my face, stood up, and quietly shut the door. "I saw enough," I said. She nodded once and turned her monitor toward me. On the screen sat the transaction trail in gray and blue. Employee override channel, Tyler's credentials, timestamp while I was admitted in labor. Transfer route from our emergency fund into a Blue Ace escrow account, then out through Vegas hospitality charges and event deposits. No speculation, no marital interpretation. A chain. "That's not a standard member withdrawal," Marjorie said. "That is an employee using internal access in a way he cannot defend." I stared at the screen until the numbers steadied. Then I understood why I had not walked in there screaming. Because Tyler would have loved that room. He would have wrapped himself in patience, called me exhausted, postpartum, emotional. He would have made my pain look larger than his theft. No. Let him keep his room for now. I wanted the one with minutes, witnesses, and consequences. Then Marjorie slid a compliance form across the desk and tapped the unsigned line at the bottom. "Your husband never disclosed Blue Ace," she said. "And tonight he's listed to speak at the Stonebridge Community Excellence Gala." I did not confront Tyler at Stonebridge. That decision probably saved me more than the money ever could have. Women like me get misread all the time, especially after childbirth. If you are quiet, organized, and still capable of finding the insurance card with one hand while holding a newborn with the other, people assume you are built to absorb things. They mistake steadiness for surrender. They mistake the woman folding onesies at midnight for the woman who will sign whatever gets slid in front of her when she is tired enough. Tyler had made that mistake long before Vegas. I left Marjorie's office with a thick envelope in my diaper bag and my body throbbing in places no one talks about honestly. The afternoon light in the parking lot looked too bright for what I knew. I sat behind the wheel without turning the engine on. Breast pads in my bra, discharge papers on the passenger seat, a half-eaten granola bar in the cup holder. That was the glamour level of my revenge. Then my daughter cried from the back seat, tiny and outraged, and I leaned over to touch the soft edge of her blanket. Okay, I whispered. Now we do this in order. At home, the house smelled like diaper cream, reheated soup, and the fresh paint of the nursery Tyler had once stood inside, promising me that everything else could wait. His duffel bag was still in the closet, his slippers still by the sofa. Men leave evidence of themselves everywhere without noticing. I fed the baby, changed her, and laid her in the bassinet in the den where I could watch her breathe while I worked. Then I opened my laptop and started building what Tyler had assumed I was too overwhelmed to build. A sequence. Hospital admission time, 10:47 p.m. Bank alert, 2:16 a.m. Tyler's text, 2:18 a.m. Instagram story timestamp, 2:21 a.m. Employee override log, 2:14 a.m. Blue Ace escrow confirmation, 2:27 a.m. The room got very quiet around me after that. Just the refrigerator humming, the baby monitor giving off little static sighs, and the ache in my back every time I stood too fast. I made copies of everything twice. One folder for me, one folder for somewhere Tyler would never think to look. At 4:30, my sister Brooke came by with frozen breakfast burritos and the kind of face women wear when they already know the answer, but want to see whether you will lie for a man. "Well?" she asked. I handed her the envelope from Marjorie. Brooke read for maybe 30 seconds, then looked up slowly. "He used his employee access?" "Yes." "For a Vegas trip?" "For Blue Ace. Vegas was the confetti." Her mouth hardened. Brooke worked 12-hour shifts as an X-ray tech and had no patience for men who called selfishness ambition. "What do you want me to do?" she asked. That was why I trusted her. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Do you want to talk?" What do you want me to do? "I need a witness for where I keep the copies," I said. "And I need someone to hold the baby at the gala next week if I go." Brooke blinked. "You're going?" "I'm not letting him narrate fatherhood in a tux while compliance is holding a file." By evening, I had done 3 things Tyler would not notice until it was too late. I opened a new checking account in my name only and rerouted my direct deposit. I changed the password on the budgeting software he never used but always benefited from. And I moved the remaining money from our household float into protected bill pay buckets that required fresh authorization. At 7, Tyler finally called. I watched his name light up the screen while I sat on the edge of the bed, burp cloth over my shoulder, my daughter asleep against my chest. On his side of the phone, I could hear bar noise and male laughter trying too hard to sound expensive. I answered, but did not say hello. He exhaled like I was the difficult one. "Lena, don't do anything stupid." "I already did the stupid thing," I said. "I married my emergency." There was silence. Then his softer voice came on, the one he used whenever he wanted to make me feel childish for noticing what he had done. "You're exhausted. You had a hard delivery. Don't make a bank alert into a marriage." I looked down at our daughter's face, pink and slack with sleep, one tiny hand curled under her chin. Then I looked at the spreadsheet still open on my laptop. "No," I said. "You did that." He sighed. "I did this for our future." After I hung up, I wrote that sentence down too, because men like Tyler always think the lie that destroys them sounds better in their own voice. By Tuesday, my stitches hurt less than my pride. The body bargains with you after birth. Sit slower, stand straighter, don't laugh, keep water nearby. Remember, there is a wound no one can see under the mesh underwear and the oversized sweatpants and the polite smile you give the pediatrician when she asks whether help is coming at night. Help was not coming. Brooke was on my couch, with the baby tucked into one arm, when Marjorie called just after 9. The house smelled like coffee, diaper cream, and the lilies someone from Tyler's church had dropped off with a card that said, "Congratulations on your blessing," as if blessings always arrived with account theft and bottle service. "I reviewed the access path," Marjorie said. I carried the cordless phone into the kitchen and shut the door. The fridge hummed. My daughter made one thin cry in the den before Brooke's voice turned low and steady. "And?" I asked. "And if this were a standard member transfer, I'd tell you to call a divorce lawyer and leave me out of it." Papers moved on her desk. It wasn't. I leaned against the counter. What was it? Employee channel override from Tyler's credentials at 2:14 a.m. Dual authorization bypassed. Funds moved to Blue Ace's escrow intake, then settled through hospitality merchants in Las Vegas within 13 minutes. The room sharpened. Not because I had not guessed, because hearing a woman like Marjorie say it in bank language made it stop being marital ugliness and become misconduct. "Can he say I approved it?" "He can say anything," she said. "He cannot make the logs agree." That line steadied me more than it should have. Marjorie emailed the first packet while I was still on the phone. Transaction trail. Internal policy excerpt on dual authorization. Screen captures of the override channel with Tyler's user ID boxed in red. At the bottom sat the form that mattered most. Outside business interest disclosure. Blank where Blue Ace should have been listed. "He never filed it," she said. "And he used household member funds while omitted from disclosure review." "I need that in writing." "You'll have it. But understand me, Lena. Once I move this upstairs, it stops being a favor from a bank officer who likes you. It becomes compliance." I looked through the little kitchen window at Brooke pacing the den with my daughter on her shoulder, patting her diaper in a rhythm older sisters are born knowing. "That's what I want," I said. Marjorie lowered her voice. "Then don't argue with him in texts. Don't threaten him. Let him keep performing." There was my first ally named properly, not a rescuer, a woman with access, procedure, and enough respect not to mistake my pain for incompetence. After I hung up, I printed everything before fear could make me delay. The pages came out warm and accusing. Blue Ace escrow, Vegas merchant settlement, Tyler's user ID, missing disclosure. I stacked them in order the way I stack past due accounts at work. Oldest lie first, newest lie last. Let the sequence convict. Around noon, Carla called from the hospital. "Hope I'm not bothering you," she said. "I remembered you asked about timing." Her voice had the same brisk kindness she'd used in the delivery room. "I'm grateful," I said. She read from the chart. Admission time, transition labor note, dilation check. The exact time she showed me Tyler's Instagram story because she was angry enough on my behalf to stop pretending his privacy mattered more than my reality. Then she emailed me a short statement from her hospital account. Nothing dramatic, just what she saw and when she saw it. At 2:21 a.m., patient viewed husband's public social media showing celebratory activity in Las Vegas. Patient had active labor signs and pending delivery at that time. Clean, professional, deadly. That was my mini payoff. Not victory, verification. Tyler could call me tired, overwhelmed, hormonal, whatever word made him sound calm and me sound small. He could not call the labor chart a mood. He tried anyway by 3:30. His text came while I was measuring formula into tiny glass bottles because nursing had gone sideways and my daughter had lungs like a union organizer. "Can we not do drama? You know Vegas was work adjacent. Don't let one hard week turn me into some villain. I wrote the last line down and did not answer. Brooke watched me from the table. He always gets gentler when he's dirty. I know. What's next? I looked at the compliance packet, then at the gala invitation still magneted to the fridge. Stonebridge Community Excellence Gala. Family, leadership, future. What's next, I said, is letting him tell the room who he thinks he is. That evening, Marjorie sent one more email marked confidential. Attached was the gala program draft. At the bottom, under Vice President Recognition and Community Sponsorship Remarks, sat a line that made my whole body go cold all over again. Special introduction of Blue Ace consultant Shay Monroe. By Friday, the story Tyler was trying to sell had started growing decorations. That was how I thought of it while I stood in my kitchen at 6 a.m, pumping milk with one hand and scrolling through Stonebridge emails with the other. My daughter was finally asleep in the bassinet after a night of hiccups, and the house smelled like coffee, lanolin, and the chicken soup Brooke had left in the fridge. Outside, the neighborhood was still dark. Inside, Tyler was building himself a brighter life in drafts. Marjorie had sent the next packet just after midnight. Not only the gala program, the attachments behind it. A Blue Ace email chain about optics, donor comfort, and family forward positioning. A mock social caption describing Tyler as a rising banker, new father, and community-minded operator with the right kind of calm under pressure. There was also a reimbursement outline showing how Vegas hospitality was supposed to be washed into future sponsor activity once Stonebridge money and local donor checks came in. And at the bottom sat the line that finally made the whole machine show its face. Use the family man angle. Wives trust him. I read that one 3 times. Then I texted Marjorie one sentence. I want to see the room before he speaks in it. She replied 10 minutes later. Country club set up at 4. Side entrance. Don't announce yourself. So at 4 that afternoon, Brooke stayed with the baby. I put on the only dress that still fit without insulting my stitches, and I drove to the club with a pad in my underwear and my compliance folder buckled into the passenger seat like a second child. The ballroom was already half lit when I slipped in through the service hallway. Banquet staff polishing glasses, florals in buckets. At the far end of the room, a champagne wall had been built under a navy backdrop printed with 3 words in gold. Family, leadership, future. Then I heard Tyler laugh. He was near the sponsor board with Shay. She wore a pale gold jumpsuit and the kind of heels women choose when they expect a room to notice them. Tyler stood behind her with one drink in each hand, reading over her shoulder while she held the marker poised above the board. From where I stood, half hidden by a floral cart, I could see exactly how close he was. Too high, he murmured. Then he set one glass down, covered her hand with his, and guided the marker across the sponsor line. The gesture hit me first as humiliation, and then, worse, as memory. The nursery, his hand over mine on the crib rail. You and the baby come first. Now he was laying that same claim over another woman's hand in a room paid for by donors and polished for promotion. Shay looked up at him over her shoulder and smiled. You do realize this is insane. Tyler grinned. Insane would be letting you spell your own last name wrong in front of bored people. She laughed and tipped her head back just enough for him to kiss the place behind her ear. That did it. Not because it was erotic, because it was familiar. He used to kiss the back of my neck in the nursery doorway when I started worrying out loud about labor. Just enough to make me feel steadied, chosen, less alone inside responsibility. Now he spent that same little currency on Shay between a champagne wall and a sponsor board. Then he slid his hand to the small of her back and led her 2 steps aside so a photographer could test the lighting on them. A trial run, a future memory already being arranged. Shay glanced toward the room and lowered her voice, though not low enough. "Are you sure your wife won't show?" Tyler took his glass back and shrugged. "Lena handles bills. I handle moves." There are insults that wound, and insults that explain your whole marriage in one line. That one explained mine. Shay lifted a brow. Some women are built for babies. Some are built for rooms. I stood there with my compliance folder pressed against my ribs and felt something in me go cold enough to stop shaking for good. Because neither of them sounded guilty. They sounded strategic. Like I was not a woman recovering from childbirth and theft. I was merely a category they had already moved past. When Tyler saw the event manager wave him over, he squeezed Shay's waist once before stepping away. That squeeze mirrored the other memory, too. His hand at my ankle, his voice promising the safety money stayed for us. Same confidence, same ownership. I waited until they moved apart before slipping back through the hallway to the smaller compliance office Marjorie had borrowed for setup review. She was inside with her blazer folded over the chair back and a laptop open to the gala script. "You saw enough?" she asked. "Yes." She rotated the screen toward me. There, in the final speaking order, beneath Vice President Recognition and Blue Ace Community Partnership remarks, was the line Tyler had been dressing himself for all week. Special remarks from Tyler Parker on family, leadership, and future growth. By Saturday morning, Tyler had started speaking about me the way men speak about weather they hope will pass before guests arrive. Brooke found the first version of it on Facebook while she was burping the baby against her shoulder and eating dry cereal from a mug because neither of us had managed a real breakfast yet. Tyler's mother had posted a photo of his old baseball team with a caption about how good men still show up for their brothers even when life gets hectic. One of Tyler's friends wrote, "Proud of you, man. Family and future." The same 2 words hanging over the country club stage. I was at the kitchen table in mesh underwear and one of Tyler's old t-shirts, sorting pediatric paperwork into piles. Weight check. Bilirubin follow-up, formula coupons. Brooke turned the phone toward me. "That fast?" I asked. She snorted. "He's laundering character." That was exactly what it felt like. He had spent our safety money, left me in labor, draped himself around Shay in public, and now he was letting older women with casserole faith sand the edges off him for free. By noon, the next move arrived in my inbox. Subject line: Temporary Family Liquidity Acknowledgement. Tyler had sent it from his personal email, not Stonebridge, which told me Marjorie's compliance hold had reached far enough to make him careful. The attachment was dressed in soft language. Family cash flow bridge. Temporary repositioning. Mutual understanding of investment timing. A blank line for my signature and, under that, one sentence that would have made me laugh if I had not been so tired. Spouse confirms prior awareness and support. I printed it, laid it on the table, and stared at the lie long enough for my milk to let down through the nursing pads. That is postpartum for you. The body keeps doing its work while your marriage turns into document review. Brooke came back from the nursery with the baby hiccuping against her chest. "He really thinks you'll sign this?" "He thinks I'll be too tired not to." That was when I knew what the next 24 hours had to look like. No dramatic texts, no calls to his mother, no vague threats. Just sequence, locks, witnesses, copies. I spent the afternoon doing what Tyler had always counted on me to do, only this time, none of it was for him. I finalized my direct deposit change. I set up a new auto-pay path for the mortgage and utilities through my separate account. I downloaded 6 months of statements and flagged every transfer Tyler had ever called temporary. Then I built the binder. Admission, alert, text, Instagram, override, escrow, conflict, emails, gala. By the time I finished, the kitchen smelled like reheated soup, coffee gone bitter on the warmer, and lavender baby soap. My back ached. My daughter had cluster-fed twice. I had changed 3 diapers, 1 shirt, and the emotional temperature of my whole life without leaving the house. Tyler called just after 6. I let it go to voicemail because men like him reveal more when they think they're speaking into air. His voice came through calm and low, that same tone he used when he wanted to sound like the only adult in the room. "Lena, don't be stubborn. I know you're overwhelmed and I'm trying to fix this. Sign the acknowledgement, come to the gala, smile, nod, and let me clean this up in the room." I listened twice, then I wrote down 3 words from the middle. Fix this in the room. Not us, not the money. Not the fact that our daughter's first night on Earth had been funded by fraud and champagne. The room. Around 7:30, Marjorie emailed again. Stonebridge still hadn't announced anything publicly, but Tyler's vice president recognition was now marked pending compliance review in the internal script. Blue Ace's sponsorship signing remained on the agenda, though council had inserted "subject to final approval" beside it in red. She also attached the account agreement Tyler had broken, complete with the dual auth clause highlighted. That clause mattered, because I had typed it myself into our household binder months earlier, right under emergency fund rules. Tyler had joked then that I ran our finances like FEMA. "No," I had said, "like a woman who doesn't enjoy being surprised." He had kissed the back of my neck after that and called me his favorite kind of overprepared. I stood in the kitchen with the printed policy in one hand and remembered the warmth of that kiss, the easy pride in his voice, the way I had smiled into the cabinet door because I thought being understood was the same thing as being safe. Then the baby cried from the bassinet, sharp and offended, and the memory broke. Brooke met me in the hall and took one look at my face. "You okay?" "No," I said, "but I'm accurate." At 9, Tyler sent one last message. "You're making this bigger than it is." I looked at the sleeping baby beside me, at the binder on the nightstand, at the printed clause about unauthorized employee access, and typed nothing back. Because by then, it was already bigger than him. It was policy. It was money. It was a labor room. It was a room full of people he planned to fool. And tomorrow night, he was still planning to walk into that ballroom, take a microphone, and talk about fatherhood like the word belonged in his mouth. By the time Sunday evening came, I had stopped thinking of the gala as an event. It was a room, and rooms have rules. That was something my job had taught me long before Tyler ever mistook my silence for weakness. You do not walk into a room full of money, ego, and reputation and throw your biggest truth first. You let the room reveal what it thinks it is there to celebrate. Then you place one fact in the center and watch who flinches. The Stonebridge Community Excellence Gala was being held at the Riverview Country Club, the kind of place with low amber lighting, framed black and white photos of dead golfers in the hallway, and carpet thick enough to swallow the sound of expensive shoes. Tyler loved that room. Men like him always do. Too polished to feel tacky, too public to call personal. Just enough bourbon and donor money in the air for a weak man to imagine his story can harden before anyone checks the numbers. That was why it had to happen there, not at home, where he could pace the kitchen and call me tired. Not in a lawyer's office, where he could act misunderstood and sorry. At the club, under the banner, in front of the board, the donors, the local business people, his mother, his friends, the Blue Ace men, and every person Tyler needed to think of him as safe with money and impressive with family. Because if his lie died there, it would not die as a marriage issue. It would die as a public record of who he was. Brooke came over at 4 in leggings and a messy bun, with the baby strapped to her chest and a giant tote bag full of bottles, burp cloths, and the sort of practical items women carry when they are planning for reality instead of image. "You sure you don't want me there?" she asked from the front hall, while I pinned one earring in with one hand and held the binder under my arm with the other. "No." "You sure you don't want the baby there?" That made me stop. I looked down at my daughter sleeping against Brooke's sweatshirt, her mouth open slightly, one fist tucked under her chin exactly the way she slept when the world had not yet taught her what men cost. "No," I said. "He used her once already." Brooke nodded like she had expected that answer. "Then go make him stand there alone." I wore the navy wrap dress that still fit without fighting my body. My hair was clean but not glamorous. Makeup enough to look awake, not enough to look like I had spent 3 hours trying to beat Shay at her own game. That mattered to me. I was not going as a wife, not even as a woman humiliated in public. I was going as the person who had the file. The binder sat on the passenger seat all the way to the club. I had tabbed it by sequence, not outrage. Admission, alert, text, Instagram, policy, override, escrow, conflict, emails, acknowledgement. That order mattered. It walked the room from cruelty to fraud one clean step at a time. First the labor room, then the money, then the lie, then the system. When I got to Riverview, the valet smiled too brightly and said, "Congratulations on the new baby," which told me Tyler had already used fatherhood as part of the evening before I had even reached the door. Inside, the ballroom glowed in gold and navy. Candles on mirrored risers, white roses, a champagne wall under the banner. At the far end, the stage, and on the screen behind it, a slideshow of Stonebridge families, employees, smiling children, volunteer days, men in sport coats holding giant scissors at ribbon cuttings. It was offensive how easy image is to manufacture when a woman is home measuring formula. I checked in at the side table. The volunteer handed me my name card with the kind of careful smile people use when they know something but not enough. Lena Parker, table 7, not near the stage, respectable but peripheral. Of course, Tyler had no intention of letting me exist close enough to alter his lighting. I found table 7 and did not sit. I set my clutch down, took one slow breath, and looked toward the head tables. There he was. Tyler stood under the family, leadership, future banner in a black tux I had paid to have tailored last spring for a chamber event he swore would help his career. Shay was beside him in ivory satin, one hand resting on the back of his chair as if it already belonged to her. He leaned toward her to say something, and she laughed, with her head tipped just enough for his hand to find the small of her back. Same gesture, same claim, same room he thought I did not know how to enter. Then his mother appeared beside them in silver and pearls, touching Shay's arm with a little fondness she had never once wasted on postpartum women in milk-stained bras. One of the Blue Ace founders clapped Tyler on the shoulder. A board member smiled. The photographer adjusted the angle. They were already framing the future. Good, I thought. Let it be fully lit. Marjorie found me near the service bar 10 minutes later. Navy dress, low heels, reading glasses hanging on a chain against her chest. She carried no binder, which meant the folder was already where it needed to be. "Counsel is here," she said quietly. "Board? All but one. Blue Ace? At the front." She glanced once toward Tyler, then back at me. "Do you still want the same order?" "Yes. Admission first." She nodded. "Good." That was when the MC tapped the microphone and asked everyone to take their seats. Across the room, Tyler turned toward the stage lights with Shay at his side, and the whole polished life he had been building arranged around him like proof. Then he looked up and saw me standing there with my place card still in my hand. Tyler saw me before the MC finished the welcome. That part mattered. I wanted him to have just enough time to understand that I was not home with the baby, not crying into a nursing pillow, not signing his little liquidity fiction at the kitchen table. I wanted him to stand under that gold banner with family, leadership, future glowing behind his head and feel the first clean slip of uncertainty before he ever touched the microphone. He masked it fast. Of course he did. One hand slid to Shay's elbow. He bent his head as if saying something charming. She smiled up at him, but I saw it in the way his shoulders stiffened before he turned toward the stage. The ballroom settled. Silverware quieted. The donors leaned in. Somebody near the back laughed once and then stopped. A waiter carried 2 bourbon glasses past me on a tray, and the whole room smelled like white roses, steak, and expensive confidence. I took my seat at table 7 and set the binder on my lap. Tyler gave his opening remarks with the exact voice I knew he would use. Warm, modest, male in that polished, harmless way people trust too quickly. He thanked the board, thanked the community, thanked Stonebridge for believing in local leadership. He talked about service, sacrifice, stability. Then he smiled the smile that used to work on me from 3 rooms away and said, "This year taught me what family really means." There it was. Not the money first, not Vegas, family. The room softened for him. I could feel it happen. Older couples nodding. A bored wife touching the stem of her wine glass with that pleased little gesture women make when a man says the word family in a tux and makes it sound costly. Tyler went on. Sometimes leadership means making hard calls at hard times. Sometimes the future asks more of you than comfort does. I stood before he could reach the next lie. Not fast, not loud, just enough to break the picture. The chair legs scraped against the carpeted floor with a dull drag, and somehow that sound cut the room sharper than a shout would have. Tyler's eyes found me instantly. Shay turned second, his mother third. I walked toward the stage with the binder in both hands. "Since you brought up hard times," I said, "we should probably start with labor." No one moved. I stepped up beside the head table and laid the first sheet in front of the nearest board member. Hospital admission record, timestamp visible, 7 centimeters, 10:47 p.m. Then the second, the bank alert, 2:16 a.m. Then the third, Tyler's text, "The baby can wait. The boys needed me in Vegas." The MC froze with his cue card still in one hand. A woman at table 3 actually put down her fork. Tyler gave a short, controlled laugh. Lena, this is not the place. I looked at him, really looked. You chose the place, I said. I just brought the timestamps. A ripple moved through the room then. Not outrage yet. Recognition. Tyler's face tightened by one careful degree. You're taking a private misunderstanding and trying to turn it into theater. Theater? I asked. I opened the binder again and held up the screenshot of his Instagram story. Champagne spray, booth lights, his watch face visible if you knew where to look. Posted at 2:21 a.m. I was in transition labor, I said. You were in bottle service. That landed. You could feel the room split itself. Some people still trying to preserve his dignity out of habit. Others doing the simple math of a man speaking about family while his wife had been in a delivery bed with an IV in her arm. Tyler recovered the way men like him always do. He straightened his jacket, lowered his voice, and tried to make me sound smaller than the documents. She knew I was working on an investment, he said to the room, not to me. We've had a lot going on. New baby, pressure, miscommunication. There it was, the fake narrative still standing on its first shaky leg. I took one step closer to the microphone. You didn't miss a birth, I said. You liquidated one. A sound moved through the front tables, not laughter, worse for him. That stunned little intake people make when a sentence snaps the whole moral frame into place. Shay looked at Tyler then, not supportively, calculating. The way women look when they realize a man may be expensive in the wrong currency. Tyler glanced toward the board table like he could still charm his way back to center. This account move was temporary, for our future. Lena knows how these things work. I turned and placed the next page directly beside the others. Stonebridge dual authorization policy. Then the override log with his user ID. No flourish, just sequence. The board member nearest me leaned forward. One of the blue ace men stopped chewing entirely. Tyler's mother had gone pale enough that her lipstick looked too bright. Tyler's voice sharpened. That is internal information. I let that hang for half a beat. Then I said, so is our emergency fund. That was the moment the room began to leave him. Not fully, not yet. But you could see it in the faces. The donors were no longer looking at a rising banker being interrupted by an overwhelmed new mother. They were looking at a man who had used the word family as a backdrop while his own credentials sat printed in red on an override log. Tyler opened his mouth again, probably to say investment or timing or misunderstanding. He never got the chance. Because from the board table, Marjorie Sloan stood up with a compliance folder in her hand. Marjorie did not hurry. That was the first thing that killed whatever was left of Tyler's control. She rose from the board table, buttoned her blazer, and walked toward the stage carrying a thin compliance folder like it weighed more than a marriage and less than a lie. The room made space for her without being asked. Tyler tried one last smile. Marjorie, I'm sure this can be handled internally. She stopped beside me, opened the folder, and said into the microphone, It already is. Then she laid out the pages beside mine. Stonebridge policy, employee side override log, undisclosed outside business interest form, blue ace escrow path, conflict review notice. There was nothing emotional about the paper. It did not care who had just had a baby, who was in a tux, or who had perfected a public voice. It only cared about sequence. Marjorie turned to the board first. At 2:14 a.m., while Ms. Parker was admitted in active labor, Mr. Parker used employee credentials to bypass dual authorization on a member household account. Those funds were transferred into an undisclosed outside venture with which he had a material relationship. He did not file the required conflict disclosure. You could feel the floor leave him. One of the Blue Ace founders muttered, "Jesus." The board chair took off his glasses. Tyler's mother sat motionless with both hands around her napkin, as if keeping still could somehow keep him respectable. Tyler stepped toward Marjorie. "That is not fraud." Marjorie did not blink. "Then you may enjoy explaining it to Compliance Council with your system access suspended." There was my ally finisher. Not a friend yelling for me. A woman with access, policy, and the authority to shut the door Tyler thought he could walk through smiling. Shay was the next one to crack. She looked down at the emails in my binder, read the line about optics and the family man angle, and slowly moved her hand off the back of Tyler's chair. "You told me she knew," she said. Tyler turned to her too late. "Shay, don't." That tiny exchange did something the documents alone could not. It showed the whole room that his lie was not just marital spin. It was the operating language of everything he touched. I took the last pages from my binder and set them on top. The email chain. Use the family man angle. Wives trust him. The unsigned hardship acknowledgement he had wanted me to sign. Spouse confirms prior awareness and support. I tapped the blank signature line with one finger. "This," I said, "is what he needed after he emptied the account while I was in labor. Not forgiveness, paper." No one interrupted me. That silence was new. Earned. Tyler tried one final turn toward moral framing. "Lena is making a hard week look criminal because she's angry." I looked at him and felt nothing soft left. "You build fatherhood to fraud," I said. That landed harder than the first line had. The board chair stood then, slow and deliberate. "Mr. Parker, effective immediately, your vice president recognition is withdrawn, pending formal investigation. Stonebridge's participation in Blue Ace's sponsorship review is also suspended. Informational control, gone. Social control, gone. Moral framing, gone." Tyler looked around the ballroom like he had misplaced the room itself. The donors would not meet his eyes. The board had closed ranks around procedure. Shay took one step back, then another, the satin of her dress catching on the chair edge before she freed it with an embarrassed jerk. Even his mother did not come to the stage. That, more than anything, told me the truth had finished its work. I stepped closer to the microphone and gave him the sentence he had earned. "You said the baby could wait," I said. "Compliance didn't." A few people exhaled sharply. One woman at the front covered her mouth. Then I closed the binder, rested my palm on top of it, and said the only other line I needed. "You weren't building our future. You were spending mine." After that, Tyler stood under the words family, leadership, future, with nothing left in any of them that belonged to him. 3 weeks later, the house had settled into a different kind of silence. Not the frightened silence I used to hear whenever Tyler was in one of his moods, and I was trying to guess whether the evening required softness, strategy, or pretending not to notice the bill he had forgotten again. This was a cleaner silence. The kind that comes after a slammed door has finally stopped echoing, and you realize the walls are still standing. My daughter woke every 2 hours that first month, sometimes less, and I learned the new map of my life by lamplight. Formula at 110, burp cloth at 122, rocking chair creak at 137. The little milk-sour smell of a sleeper damp at the collar. My back ached. My hair stayed in a clip more than it stayed down. There were mornings I stood at the kitchen counter in flannel pants with one hand on a bottle warmer and the other on the budgeting app, rerouting one more payment into the account that now belonged only to me. It should have felt lonely. Sometimes it did. But loneliness and violation are not the same thing. And once I no longer had to share a roof with the man who confused access with love, even the hard parts started feeling honest. Stonebridge moved quickly after the gala. Tyler's system access was cut. The Blue Ace sponsorship died before the ink could touch anything official. Compliance Council took statements from Marjorie, from the board chair, and eventually from me. I gave them exactly what I had given the room: dates, screenshots, policy, sequence. Nothing more. I did not need to decorate the truth. It already knew how to stand up by itself. Tyler tried twice to call from unknown numbers. The first time, I let it ring until it stopped. The second time, I listened to the voicemail without sitting down. He sounded smaller. Not sorry, just reduced. A man suddenly hearing what his own life sounded like without applause around it. His mother sent a card with a Bible verse about forgiveness and no mention of the $18,000. I put it in the kitchen drawer with expired coupons and dead batteries, which felt like the right level of reverence. The baby fund took longer to rebuild than my piece did. That surprised me. I thought the money would be the part I kept circling. And yes, I felt every missing dollar when the hospital bill arrived, and when I priced out a new car seat, and when the pediatrician switched her formula to the expensive kind. But what came back first was something less visible and more useful. My own sense of authorship. The quiet knowledge that I was still the person who knew where everything was, how everything worked, and what needed to happen next. Some evenings, after I fed the baby and folded the miniature socks that somehow multiplied in every load of laundry, I would sit in the nursery Tyler once painted with me and listen to the hum of the baby monitor. The room no longer belonged to his promises. It belonged to the fact that I had stayed. I had fed her. I had kept the lights on. I had protected what he thought he could drain while I was bleeding and exhausted and too occupied to fight. And if you have ever been the woman holding the folder, the budget, the due dates, the backup plan, while someone else treated your steadiness like an invitation to steal, stay here. There are more stories for women who were told to wait, smile, and recover quietly, and who learned instead that even in the weakest room of their lives, they still knew exactly how to make one call that changed the ending.